Hey everybody, thank you for joining another Startaloo Bootcamp. I hope everybody is doing well. It's starting to feel like spring, sort of. I guess it depends on where you live. Today is an exciting one because, I start a lot of these bootcamp series and I'm always saying, I'm not a consultant. This is just what I do. I'm trying to just share some of the things I've learned. But guess what? We have an awesome consultant on our show, on our webinar today, Jill Allen, who I have gotten to know for been 3 years, 4 years. I don't know. We've known each other for a while. And she is just one of the coolest personalities, I think, in our industry. She is just so likable. And not to say other people aren't likable. And I know, but Jill and I have just always hit it off. And so, I asked her if she wouldn't mind being on. I'll be honest, she's got so much information to share. I didn't even know what to ask her to share because she knows like a lot about everything. But I asked her to be on and she said yes. So thank you so much for being on. This is really my privilege to have you on our webinar. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I asked her to come on and talk a little bit about discounts and, because it's something that I think a lot of us don't think a lot about. We kind of just set them in motion and then we walk away. And, I'll share a little bit of some of my experience working with our different practices and how we've seen that. And I'm going to share my screen here and let's see here. All right. So, what we titled today was getting the most out of your discounts. And Jill and I, we've had these conversations about, how oftentimes practices don't really realize what their discounts are doing and getting them to work for you. I almost feel like it's like your investment, you always hear like your money should be working for you. And I think your discounts need to fall in that same line where you're not just giving it away without getting something back for it. So this is another segment of our bootcamp series. Again, we are looking to give people some things to think about, but more importantly, something that you can, sink your teeth into. So when you come back, you actually can put some of these things in motion and actually come out stronger than ever. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Jill, tell everybody about how you got into orthodontics. How you got into this crazy field dealing with, orthodontists all the time. I don't envy you. No, I'm just kidding. And, just give us a little bit of your story.
Sure. So, I got into orthodontics. I've been doing this, I think 28 years now, which is really crazy to think I've been in this industry for so long. I actually started way back as a sterilization assistant for a doctor here in Colorado. And kind of worked my way up through the office. So I went from sterilization into assisting, became a lead assistant and then a trainer, and had this crazy idea. I was very lucky to have been working for a very progressive orthodontist and was able to be in front of a lot of the sages in our industry when they were young and, really, kicking it off. And so I got a lot of exposure to some really great consultants when I was young, made a big impression on me. And I just knew that I wanted to get into consulting. And I knew that I had to do my homework. So I had to work my way through each area of a practice. I was the girl that would keep notebooks on, what works and what doesn't work in a practice. And then 14 years ago, I decided I was ready. I was lucky enough, my husband and I got married very young. We've been married 30 years this August. So I had babies young, got married young. And when I decided to open up my business, my kids were old enough that I thought, we can take the risk and I'm ready to do this. And so that's kind of where I got started. And then I have just really had a focus and a heart for startups and younger doctors and younger team members within our industry. I really like being, kind of down in the trenches, helping people figure things out. And I also have a real heart for doctors who are looking to maybe retire, about that 8 years to retirement. So getting their practice ready to go to have an associate come in. And so, that's kind of my history. I love it that, I feel like I can still step in and look at clinical things or financial things or front desk. I really feel like I've been able to work in all those areas. So I feel like, especially when you work with startups, you have to know those areas in order to help a doctor be successful. So that's how I got started. And I love it. I've loved this industry from the minute I got into it, and still do. So it's super exciting.
That's awesome. I
Thank you.
think that makes sense, your background, because when even when you're doing kind of like a boot camp seminar, and I suggest people go on your Facebook page and listen to it. You did one yesterday. It was about staffing. I thought it was great. So definitely check that out. But I think it makes sense, when you're talking, you talk like someone who's been through it. And I think that makes sense with your past, because you can tell it's not just talk, this is what you can do, but you get that feeling that you've been in the trenches before.
Yeah, for sure. And I just, and I think that's part of it. I mean, every consultant has a different, piece or thing that they like to do, but I kind of feel like I have to know the whole office, and I just love. It's like sometimes it's like Groundhog Day. Different office, same problem. But every office has got its own personality and its own needs, and and I just love being able to jump in and help doctors and teams out. So it's a lot of fun.
So cool. All right. Well, I'm excited to see what you've got ready for us. So why don't you take over the controls here, and you can share your screen.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to just jump right in here and let's make sure. Okay. And I'll just make sure that you guys just tell me if you can see my screen.
I know I can see it.
Okay, perfect. And I am going to be turning my head just a little bit because I've got a second screen here. So sorry, just the way it works out. But what I'm going to be talking about today, and what Anthony asked me to speak about, was just making sure that we understand. And I'm going to be talking more about dental insurance in regard to the discounts that we have, and how we can optimize the codes if we are taking insurance, how we can optimize our billing codes and then track our discounts. And so I'm going to just do a very, very basic overview on just the differences when it comes to let me just back this up real quickly here, with our insurances, and just kind of talking just a little bit. And I get asked this a lot by a lot of different doctors, and I've written some articles and done some different podcasts on this. But I get asked a lot, should we be in network or should we be out of network with insurances? And I honestly think, I went through the recession in 2008. When we come out of this, and everybody goes back online, I think we're going to get a lot more of these questions again, because sometimes whether we are in or out of network sometimes has to do with what's going on just with the economy, right? And our patients and responsible parties willing to spend the money for treatment. Now, I do definitely feel like what we're going through now in 2020 is different than what we went through back in 2008. But I still think that this is a valid point that can come up. And I think especially with smaller practices, this is something that doctors and team members are kind of wrestling with. So when we look at the difference between being in or out of network, probably some of the biggest things that doctors ask me is, what's the pros or the cons of both? And I'm not going to make this an insurance session here, but I think it's just important to just kind of hit on the pros and cons. So, I always say, the pro to being out of network, to not accepting any insurances in your office, is that you do not have to discount any of your fees. So as a doctor, it is completely and totally up to you. And as as an office manager, if you're helping your doctor, set the fees for your office, it's up to you what you set, and it's up to you what you decide to discount. So if you want to do a back to the office COVID special, you can do that, and nobody's going to dictate to you like the insurance companies can, whether you give that discount or not. You don't have to bill insurances. You a lot of times don't have to verify benefits. There's a nice benefit to that. It's kind of like Big Brother can't tell you what to do when you choose to stay out of network. Some of the cons you know, that I think, you know, can come along is that you may not be found on some of the social insurance sites. And I think, you know, going back to, you know, when we had a recession before, there could be some of our patients that are coming out of this that actually didn't make more money than working, and, you know, maybe are, you know, being a little bit more frugal. And so they may be going to their insurance if they have it, and looking for doctors on their insurance. So if you're out of network, you're not going to be found there. So it's going to be really important. I always say, if you're going to stay out of network, the money that you would have been writing off potentially in some of those discounts for being in network should definitely be used towards your marketing efforts, because either way, it's marketing money in my opinion.
Right. And
If
just to,
Mhm.
just sorry, but we actually were talking about that a little bit this week, how, and I've heard other people say this, but I don't know if a lot of people think about it this way, but really anything that you're writing off should be considered a marketing expense, because you're using it with the idea of getting more patients in the door, which is the essence
Absolutely.
of marketing. And
Yep,
so,
yep.
yeah.
Yep, I completely agree. And I, you know, I always tell my docs, if you're in network, every write-off, you should count that as a marketing expense. You should
Mhm.
think of it that way. And we'll hit on that a little bit more, but you really should think about that. If it cost me a $400 write-off to get a $4,500 contract, that was a $400 marketing expense that, in the end, probably was a pretty good return on investment.
Right.
Um,
And
so if,
something else.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
I,
No, this is
I'm an
great.
Italian from New York.
I love
You
it.
can
I love
you
it.
can go you can have dinner at my house. There'll be 4 people there, and there'll be 3 conversations. I don't even know who's talking to who.
Love it.
You know, one of the things that, you know, we talk about in our office is, you know, I don't know if a lot of people think about this, but if you're writing off, and you were saying you're writing off an expense, and that might be a good return on your investment, but we also have to remember that expense that's coming off of the net, right? You know, the fixed expense is the fixed expense. It's not
Yeah.
like if I discount my fee 10%, well, I'm discounting the whole thing. I'm really discounting off of the net that would be going into my pocket. So it's more than 10%, because the fixed cost is set no matter what. So sometimes we got to think about those discounts, you know, from how much are we actually really discounting our take home.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I get asked a lot, should I go in network, Jill? What does that mean? What does that look like to my practice if I choose to do that? And I always say, you know, every practice has got to choose what's best for them, but there's really, you know, basically 3 options should you choose to go in network with a practice, or with an insurance company. The first one is more of the premier or the high level part of an insurance company. And if you know, I'm sure most of the people that are on today probably have already made decisions about insurance, but if you are thinking about it, a premier, is the only insurance level that allows you to negotiate fees. And I think that there's a big discussion a lot of times that happens in groups where people will say, well, you just need to negotiate your fees. Well, that only happens if you're on a premier level, and not all insurances provide a premier level. So, you know, you got to make sure that when you're having those debates or when you're thinking about it, you're really thinking about apples to apples. So kind of an example of what that looks like, and I'll talk about how this affects us from a discount as we get into this, but, you know, kind of an example of that is if we negotiate our rates, we're going to get what's called MAC, fees, or maximum allowable charges. And so, for instance, if our usual and customary fee was $5,500 and we were going to bill it out, and I'll talk about the importance of choosing the right billing codes with insurance. But if we were going to bill that out at a D8090 code, and the insurance only gives us a MAC of 5,000, we're going to be writing off $500. And that's where, you know, I say to my doctors, if you're going to be in network, you need to look at that write-off as that marketing expense. If you have to write off $500 to get, you know, maybe 4 or 5 more patients in your practice, is that an expense worthwhile? I would say in most cases it probably is, especially when you look at, you know, most of the marketing costs out there. So I think that that's, you know, definitely, you know, a benefit. And I suggest for most of my practices that we are on a, you know, trying to do premieres if we're going to be in insurance. Now, when it comes to, kind of the benefits of being a premier versus a PPO plan, what we see is that, we usually have a smaller discount. We've been able to negotiate. And most of the time when you're in network, any type of network with an insurance, you get paid directly. And why I think that's so important is it's a really good cash flow for a practice. You think about what's happening right now. As long as patients didn't lose their insurance, insurances aren't asking to, have payments deferred, aren't asking to, make half payments or whatnot. Insurance companies are paying like normal. And I think that having that cash flow come in from an insurance and the cash flow from the patient AR can really help a practice, especially if we ever have times like this, or you're a smaller practice just getting going. So I think there really are some benefits to being in network and having insurances pay you directly. Another option that I see a lot of practices go with is this PPO option. And this is the one, it's the preferred provider option. And this is the one that you cannot negotiate fees. They give you a fee schedule and you either say, yes, I accept it, or no, I don't. There's no going back and forth on this. But what can be a benefit or an example to this is usually a PPO schedule is a bigger discount to the patient. It a lot of times makes our doctors have to write off a little bit more. So it may or may not be as advantageous when we're looking at it from a marketing and a discount aspect of it. But a lot of times it helps us get more patients in the door. So then we kind of have to look at, if I get 6 more patients in because of a PPO plan, because I'm the only doctor in the area that's offering it, is that worth it to me versus another plan or whatnot, or being completely out of network? So, everybody's got to look at what's best for them. The biggest thing that I always say with our PPO plans, and you always have to look at the fine print. And I know we had talked about this, from the last seminar that we had done together, is with a lot of these plans, they don't want you giving additional discounts. And I think that that's something that a lot of my practices miss, is that if you're already going to give a big insurance discount, you can blame it on the insurance company why you aren't going to give your family discount, or why you aren't going to give an additional pay in full discount. Make the insurance companies be the bad guy, but don't give away any more money than you need to. If you're already accepting to give them this nice additional discount, by being in network and maybe even by being a PPO provider, don't give additional discounts. I just think that it's better not to do that. And there really is fine print in your books that they discourage that and not want you doing that.
Right.
So one of the things that I'm just going to talk about here for a minute, and again, this is not a lot to do with discounts, but a lot of my docs say, well, Jill, if I'm on these plans and I'm giving these big discounts, what about all this specialty treatment that I do? What if I do Invisalign, or what if I do Excelodent, or this, that, or the other? And the biggest thing is we've got codes that we can use, and I'm not going to get into it a lot here, but there are codes that we can use that, even though we're writing down those discounts and tracking those marketing discounts, we can add back on our Invisalign lab fee. And the difference is some of it is semantics. We don't want to say Invisalign treatment, but we can add back on an Invisalign lab fee, or we can add on, Excelodent, these other pieces that allows us to pass on charges back to our patients, which then allows us to bring our production back up again. So we have to follow what the insurance companies say, but then there are little caveats that we can use to bring our our cases back up in the right scenarios. So a lot of times Invisalign lab fees, clear braces, and the way I always say we use this kind of elective charge is we can do this baseline basic metal braces, or you can do this clear braces. We can do basic metal braces, or we can do Invisalign. So, if you kind of have that mindset, we can do class 2 elastics, or we can do a forceps spring, right? So, we kind of have, if we think about it in that regard, that's then how we can think about how do we pass on charges and not have to worry about some of those discounts being such a big gouge into our AR. Okay. The next one, I'm not really going to jump into too much. I'm just going to kind of pass through this next slide here, is the HMO and state provider plans. I'm not going to jump into that too much because I don't really want to take up too much time with that. But basically, the highlight of that is, we really make our money on, we're giving big discounts. A lot of times states are paying us. And, a lot of practices that take a lot of these plans are going more on quantity of patients versus maybe necessarily quality. And there's not a right or a wrong there. What I don't want anybody to hear from me is that one patient is better than another. I think different doctors have different hearts for who they want to treat and how they want to treat. And each plan, if you're going to be in insurance, each plan works best depending upon what type of a practice you have. So I'm going to skip over these next two slides here. Just real quickly, if anybody wants a copy of what I've got here, just reach out and I'm happy to, send it out to anybody. But the big area, the big meat and potatoes of what I know we wanted to talk about today was the codes and kind of how this can affect your practice. And I was going to say,
I'm going to interrupt for a
have
second.
you.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
If you guys aren't paying attention right now, pay attention right now. Now, I will tell you that I saw this. I first saw you do this, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. We couldn't exactly figure out the exact time. And when I first saw you present what you're about to show, I had like this mix of emotions of like, that is so cool. And what have I lost over the last 13 years not knowing this? And it was like, I was conflicted. And I would say that we were trying to calculate what you're about to show changed for us. And maybe everyone else figured this out before I did. I mean, that would not surprise me. But when you showed this and then we put this into Startler, we put this into our software, I think we were like $50,000 to $65,000 extra every year. And we had to do nothing different. So It was awesome and also heartbreaking because I missed out on that every year before. So I'm going to be quiet now because this is awesome.
Well, and what I want to say is, and I think it's important that you say this, you were with insurances. You did have insurance plans that you were accepting already. And I think sometimes what we just don't understand is the right way to bill insurances, especially if we're in a network, to get the most out of the plans. And I think that's what I was able to enlighten you on, maybe, was what are better codes to use when we are billing insurance. Because I think sometimes we, especially if you've been practicing for a while, I've been in this industry for a long time, 28 years now, and there was only just a few codes, and it was just like kind of a blanket code, and that's all you use. And so when we look at billing insurances, in the event that there's anybody on this that has not done a lot with insurances, the biggest thing that we need to just remember is that most of our ortho codes start with the D80 area. So if, when you're, maybe reviewing things in your own practice and you're going back and saying, hey, Jill said I should look up my fee schedules and each of my different insurance plans, make sure that you're looking at your D80 codes, because those are the primary ones that work with our orthodontic treatment. So if we are in, the D80 codes, that's where we are going to have whatever our negotiated or our PPO fee schedule codes are. And the important thing that I think that you need to remember is, to some extent, we have one code, and if we're in network, we could have multiple fees depending upon the code that we can charge out. And so, when I look at, an interceptive treatment, I could bill out, and I see a lot of offices, that we're billing out like at an 80-20 because they go, oh, it's limited treatment of transitional dentition. Well, it's the lowest number, so it must be the right one to use, right? But if you were to actually look at what they say, and then you were to look at your fee schedule, what you will find is a D80 30 generally pays out significantly higher than a D80 20. And so when I'm working with my offices and I'm saying, okay, well, you know, adolescent dentition, well, really, what is the definition of that? We probably got some primary teeth and we probably got some permanent teeth. I usually tell my offices kind of a good rule of thumb is this D80 30 can be used for an early treatment. And I usually say, think about this. Think about a phase 1 treatment without any appliances. So maybe a little 2x4, maybe we're just closing, you know, the little Sunday gap, you know, we're just straightening the, you know, the front, the social 4, you know, maybe we're doing just something super limited. We're kind of in and out. But the difference between billing out at an 80/20 or an 80/30 is pretty significant. I'm just going to point it out because it's on this slide. I never suggest that doctors ever use a D80 40 as a billing code. Even if we're doing limited treatment of adult dentition. Well, what does that mean? If you're doing an adult treatment, limited treatment, even, you know, what's limited to you as an orthodontist should not fall under, if you look at how little money you get on a D80 40 code, you should be billing out a comprehensive treatment in less months so that you aren't capped and you can bill out what your original fee is. I mean, that's a significant difference right there. So for early phase 1s, I'm saying, you know, let's use these codes here to, you know, to get through it. When we're also looking at phase 1s, I think the other code that I really think is super important is looking at, if we're going to use any type of an appliance, either using our D80 60 or our D80 70, depending upon the appliance or how many appliances we're using. Because again, insurance is kind of gray, but if you're looking at your fee schedules, and the biggest thing that, you know, I want my offices to do is be consistent with your billing. Don't be like, well, for MetLife, I use this code, and for Delta, I use this code. Be consistent with your billing. But if you go, gosh, for, you know, a phase 1 single appliance, you know, the difference between an 80/60 and an 80/70 is, you know, $800. Why wouldn't you be billing for your D80 70? Because what I see so many of my offices do is they're billing on that D80 70, or they were billing on the D80 20 code, and they're getting maybe $1,200, and they could be getting up to $3,200 or wherever they've chosen to have their usual and customary fee is. So I think that, you know, just being, you know, really working to use the right codes. Sorry, I just popped myself backwards here, so we'll just sit back through. Is really important for, you know, helping us get through. The next area that I think is really important. I apologize that I'm busting through these slides here. The next one that I think is really important is to talk about our full treatment codes. And I think this is one of the most important ones for many of the insurance companies. Now, there are a few, but I think for years and years and years, everybody billed out under the D80/80 code. And the biggest thing that I like to point out to people is we should be billing out under the D80/90 code. And for so many years, we thought D80/90, that's adult treatment. Well, does it say adult treatment here? It's adult dentition. And that's the key, is adult dentition. So, you know, what I always tell my doctors and my financial coordinators when we're training on it is, if they are going to have their 12-year molars are in by the time, or are going to be in by the time we're finished treatment, we're fine to use a D80/90 code. So if you're doing a full treatment, let's be using this D80/90 code, because that can be a difference in some insurances. You know, that could be a $500 to an $800 difference in a comprehensive treatment, basic metal treatment, just in using these two codes here. So 12-year molars are in, and I just say, just make sure they're in before. And I don't think I know anybody now that's starting treatment that isn't worrying about the molars and getting things going. So I think that is just a really, really important piece to pay attention to when you're looking at these codes. So go for the D8090. I think that was probably one of the biggest switches.
My heart
that
is
you
still
guys
breaking. Years of the 8080. And I'll show you. What's so funny, I was laughing a little bit because I remember when we watched this, we watched it, and I went up to my team with my financial coordinator and treatment coordinators, and I was like, look, we got to make a change. We got to do it like today, like the next patient that walks in, because we're losing out. I think it was like $500 on, I'm in network with just a few, but it was about $500 each. Mm-hmm. And they were like, no, you can't do the 8090 code. It's not adult. I'm like, no, read it again. It says adult dentition, which is what you just said. And they were kind of like looking at each other like, what does that even mean? It was like this weird kind of moment. But I will show at the end for all our Startler users how you can preload this into your system so you will never miss out on that $500 again. And it's make it very easy for your financial coordinator, because then the question comes like, how does your financial coordinator know if the 12-year molars are in and what to bill? So we kind of work through that on our software. So I'll show you that at the end. But yeah. This is, I still have that same feeling of like, this was amazing and heartbreaking.
Well, I'm glad though that you've been able to make up for it going forward over the last couple of years. So to everybody out there, if you aren't billing a comprehensive treatment at a D8090, make that one change, and it really will make a difference versus going with an 8080. And surprisingly, you can use a D8080. This is the most mind-blowing thing of it all. You can use a D8080 for an early phase 1 treatment if you've got some appliances going. The only caveat is with most of the insurances, you have to have a year between when you bill out your first 8080 to when you bill out it either as a secondary phase 2, or you just go ahead and bill out an 8090 code. So, again, it really helps open up where you're capped at when you're looking, if you are in network and you know what we're talking about here, on where you're capped at with your fees, and where you were able to negotiate with. I'm just gonna quickly just kind of show there are other codes out there that we can use. Probably the biggest one is, a big change in the last year was a lot of offices, and and I suggest that docs do this. If you're in network, you can bill out your space maintainers. They used to be a D1515 code. Now they're a D1520. But that comes out of a patient's dental benefit, and we don't even have to touch their ortho benefit. So if you happen to be doing an observation where you're going to throw in a holding arch or a little space maintainer in there, you can bill out this code. You've already negotiated your fees. If you go and look at your fee schedule, it's probably $650-ish, something like that. It's kind of in that range. You're going to get that just paid right out. And then you don't have to tap into their ortho benefit. And so a lot of times what I'm telling my docs is if you are in network, sometimes we have to even think just a little bit differently about how we treatment plan our early phase treatment to get the most out of some of these other codes, so that you can, get the most out of the benefit, and you aren't having to discount, which I know is what we're talking about today, all of these, other things. So, some of these other codes that we could use, I'm going to zip through these slides because I don't really want to get into them too much. But if you've got questions, you can always reach out to me later, and I'm happy to answer questions. But the biggest takeaway that I didn't want to spend a ton of time, and I didn't want this to be a whole big insurance webinar here, but the biggest thing I want you to think about, and I think you'll really see this once Anthony gets into seeing the back end of the Startaloo piece, is I always tell my clients, if we're going to be in network with insurances, number one, every time you do a discount in your system, it should not be under the generic name discount. So if it's a Delta PPO discount, that's what it should be under. If it's a MetLife PPO or a MetLife Premier discount or an Aetna, And the reason for that is you want to be able to go into your software. You want to be able to go in, and I always say it's like an investment portfolio. We want to be able to go in and look at all of the discounts accordingly. And then we want to be able to look at the production that we got that went in conjunction with those discounts to then be able to say, does it make sense that I continue to be in network or continue to give these discounts with these insurance companies? And I think you can do that with any discounts within your practice. But, and this is where I'll hand the screen back over to Anthony, but I think what's so great about Startaloo is it can be a little bit difficult in different areas to pull all of this information out. But with what Startaloo does, and we'll be able to see that is, you know, you can pull out that data, mine that data, you know, right out of there. And it makes it very easy for you to see as a business owner, am I getting a return on my investment? And my investment dollars would be the marketing dollars or the marketing discounts that we are giving by participating in these plans, if we choose to do it. And you can do the same thing with, and you've talked about this with marketing, you know, just with if you're investing in different marketing avenues, you want to be able to see, are you getting that return as well? But when it comes to insurance, I think, you know, having these designated. So I'm going to let you take back over. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and it's all you.
Well, we did get a question. So before I move on to that, why don't we address it? Because I think it's a really good one. So it looks like Sean would like to have clarification. Can the 8090 code, does the 8090 code increase how much you can charge or how much insurance pays?
So the best thing that you, or the biggest thing you need to do is go back and look at what you're credentialed at. And in most cases, most insurance companies, there is a different amount of money that you were credentialed for between an 8090 code and an 8080 code. Now, there are some, like I'll use MetLife as an example. Usually MetLife, a D8080 and a D8090, a lot of times are the exact same fee. But we could be on a Cigna plan and have, you know, maybe a $500 or $600 difference potentially. So it's important for you to go back and look at your plans. And then the other thing that I see so many of my offices do is they kind of think that it's credential once and forget it. You need to be credentialing and checking the new fees every year, because usually either every July or every January, a new fee schedule, depending upon the insurance company that you're with, is going to come out. And hopefully they've raised your fees, which you should then in turn be, you know, raising those fees. So I have a lot of offices that are billing from 5 years ago, you know, fees, because the financial coordinator said, well, I just know that's what they pay. And, you know, and well, if you bill low, you get paid low, you know, so you need to look at, you know, you need to keep up with that. And if you're a premier, you need to re-credential and push for higher fees for sure, when you have that opportunity. Hopefully that answered your question.
That's another one of those heartbreaking moments where you realize, oh, I could have been billing, because you can't go back. You know, you can't go back and recoup. So that's why what you're talking about is just so important for us all to, you know, to immediately go out and check this. And now's the perfect time. You're closed, right? Just go out there, you know, get your schedules. And if you're using our software, load the information in our software. Again, I'll show you how to use it. We did get another question. Why don't let's look at it. Since most insurance companies have a lifetime maximum, how do you talk to a parent who is going into phase 2 and so much was eaten up by phase 1 if you're billing as 8090?
Well, again, the insurance, what you're billing, to some extent, I guess it could affect their lifetime max to a point. But, you know, I would just go back to, you know, the discount that they got, or just keeping it as a positive. A lot of times though, when we're looking at a phase 1 to a phase 2, usually what I say is more than likely the time between when you bill out for phase 1 and when you bill out for phase 2 is significant enough that a lot of times they've changed insurances already. Mm-hmm. So they may have a whole nother phase 1, you know, or I mean, a whole nother insurance by the time you're ready to bill out that phase 2. But also usually phase 2s are more expensive, and I think it washes out in the end anyways. So.
Yeah. And if the person who asked that question, if you want, you can go back to our boot camp series where we talked about patient profiling. one of the things that we've done in my office to help with that is if I have somebody who's going into a phase 2 and they've consistently been a good payer, they've paid on time, they've come to their appointments, we want them as part of our practice, we reward those patients. We do offer a small discount, but then we reward them with extra time to pay it, plus a no money down start. And that for us has gotten most people over the hump of, oh, I'm starting on the payment plan, because actually the payment tends to be pretty similar to what it was on the phase 1. And so you're not hitting them with this down payment. So that's something that really worked out well for us. Let me just see here. Got another question here. Let me, so our office is always abided by the AAO at a glance sheet that refers to adult dentition as the dentition that is present after the cessation of growth that would affect orthodontic treatment. So doesn't that mean that growth puberty, not just dentition? Ooh, I'm gonna let you handle that one.
Yeah, I know. And I guess I don't want to challenge the AAO, but in working with lots and lots and lots of insurance companies, a lot of times the insurance companies themselves change it up to a D80-90. So, I train and go off of what I have learned working with insurance companies over the years, and feel very comfortable that we are not cheating the system by using that D80-90 code.
Yeah. And I would say, to back that up, I mean, it's the insurance company that's going to dictate the rules of how they bill. And if you read through the language of those contracts, I think everything you've said is spot on. I don't think there's anything that you could challenge what you've said based on what's in those contracts. Now, certainly if there's a contract that has probably additional language in there, you'd have to abide by that. But from what I've seen, and I'm not in a lot, but the ones that we have, it's exactly what you've said. So it's funny. Remember I said, when I first presented this to my team, they were like, no, you can't do that. And then as we looked at it more and more, we were like, I think we can do this. Like, yeah, this is exactly what it says.
Yeah. And I think that, again, the biggest thing that I see is be consistent. If there were ever to be a question, it's just being consistent with what you're doing. And it's not cherry picking and saying, well, I use this code for this company and I only bill out this for this company. And just be consistent and you're not going to have a problem. And I know that, you're going to have to choose where you're going to take your information, but I've got practices over practices that are using the D80-90. And again, it's the insurances that dictate and that mandate that, and control that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So I'm going to take a couple minutes here just as we're wrapping up, and I'm going to show you how, because we, when we had learned this bit of information and after the heartbreak was over, we said, all right, now let's make sure we never have this happen again where we're stuck. And we said, how do we now streamline this whole process? Because if you think about it, there's a little bit of a connection between your treatment coordinator and your financial coordinator on what code for them to bill. So what we did is we went into our system, the StarLu system, and anybody who's on our program knows that you have an insurance provider drop down, and that can be in network or out of network. If it's in network, you just sync it with your procedures. So all your fee schedule comes in, it gets pulled into the system. So, let's say we're going to use the Delta braces 80-90. This is actually a screenshot from my actual program. And so we're going to, in this case, it's an 80-90. Now, why do we want it here? Because the treatment coordinator knows if they have the adult teeth or not, the adult dentition. I don't want my financial coordinator to have to be looking at PANs and figuring that out. So the treatment coordinator says, okay, this is a 15-year-old who has all their adult dentition. They use the 80-90 code. And then from there, it's automatically going to pull in our UCR, and then it'll discount the amount for the insurance. So we get the negotiated rate. So it's already done for you. You don't have to remember it, because what we're talking about is an extra level of complexity that you're requiring your treatment coordinator to know. All right, 80-80 gets this discount and 80-90 gets this discount. So you just want to automate it. This screenshot here just shows how on the back end you can say, look, I'm not going to allow them to get any additional discounts on top of it. And that's something we can have another conversation another time about, out of control discounts. So again, you can take what Jill is teaching you and put it right into your system, and then you walk away from it. And what you do is every 6 months, you just look through your data. Is this still making sense? Yes, it does. Do I need to update my, any insurance information? No, everything, all the fee schedule is the same. You're done. You don't have to do anything else. And you're maximizing your profitability. So from a metric standpoint, you just go back into our options. You would pick the one that you wanted to look at, or you could group them all together, look at the conversion rate of just that insurance plan. You can see how much discounts you've written off on that insurance plan, and you can see how much it produced. So, even without going into greater detail, just looking at these three numbers from a business decision, you're going to be able to pretty quickly say, you know what, this is worth it, or no, you know what, I think it's time for me to back out of this. So, we did talk a little. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I just think this data right here that you were just showing, that's huge. As a consultant, this is like meat and potatoes, love, drooling over this information here, right? Because this helps you as a business owner make really good decisions. You aren't just going off of, well, I think it's good being in network. Well, I think, doing that discount made sense. I look at this and go, 24,000 in a write-off to get 154 in production. It makes sense to me, and I've got a good conversion rate out of that.
Right.
So I think just having this data is huge for helping you make good decisions within your practice.
Yeah, and just every 6 months you go in, look at it. Yep, makes sense. You're done, right? And it's all automated. You're not having to spend time stripping through, a lot of data sets or anything like that, or Excel sheets. Yeah, and I think anything what we've been harping on every bootcamp series is, it's, if you make a business decision, you got to own it. You got to make sure you're following through on it to see, like, does this really make sense from a business perspective, or am I just doing it out of emotion? So let me see. Was there another question? Let me see. I think actually, nope. I think that answered all the questions that we have. And so this is, again, this is part of our bootcamp series. And Jill, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I was excited from the minute I asked you, if you'd come in and do this, because this was such an impactful information for us to use personally. So, and again, if you don't know Jill, you should. She's at all the meetings, and she is just an awesome person to talk to and just knows so much. So check out her Facebook page. And we're going to be doing, we're not going to do a bootcamp series on Friday because the TDO Live is going up, which Jill will be speaking. When are you going to be talking for that? On that one?
It's Friday afternoon. I think it's like 3 or 3:30, something like that.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we don't want to compete with that. I'm going to be sitting listening to all these great people talking. So we'll do on Monday, and Monday we're going to have one on follow-up, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that. So it's going to be pretty cool. We'll have a special guest, and just keep an eye out for who that will be. So thank you, everybody. Be safe. Get ready to start opening up our practices coming up soon, and check us out on our Facebook page and our website, startaloo.com. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.